Hi there, everybody. Welcome to Know the Code Show. Today, we're going to be talking about grid patterns. There are times when you want to display your articles within a particular grid pattern instead of having them stacked on top of one another, if you can picture that. I'm doing that now on DevHub. You see, this is a 2-column grid pattern, right? We have a 3-column grid pattern on the partners page. So you can see there are 3 columns, right, per row. And that's how we're going to talk about this today, is we're going to look at different grid patterns and how to set them up and the code behind it. If you're in the Genesis community, we do this a lot, right? So the CSS is already built into the child theme, so we know how to use those. But maybe you don't understand the code behind it, and we're going to talk through that. This is part 1, and part 2, we're going to go even further, and we're going to take a look at refactoring so that we can do the code with multiple different types of column patterns. But for today in part 1, we're just going to mainly be talking about the 2-up, which is this one here, 2 columns per row. All right, so I'm going to get rid of that so we can go back. Let me explain the starting code to you. I gave you some code to begin with, right? And so let's go through it real quick. The very first thing that you see is there is a filter for post_class. Now let me explain this. What happens is, and I shouldn't have gotten rid of that, darn it. Let me go back and pull that up again. 1 second, please. And while that loads up, it's being very slow today. Basically, what you want to do is what WordPress does for every post, there is a filter that has all the styling classes that are going to be rendered out to that particular article. I call them articles. They're actually posts. And if we scroll down, let's head on back down to here and let's take a look. I'm in Chrome, so I'm going to inspect the element if you're not familiar with DevTools. And I'm going to come up and I'm going to look at the article. I don't know if you can see this well enough or not. You can do this on your own if you can't see it. But basically, this is the article, and each of these are, I'm using HTML5. Each of these are articles. You can see the class equals double quotes, and then here are each of these styling classes. Styling means with CSS, you can go out and target those and now apply styles to those particular classes. We're not going to be specifically talking about styles today. However, you can see them over here on the right in the styles panel to see that, okay, for this particular one, we have body dot, and there's a grid, there's an entry, and then there's more classes after that, and we're doing something, right? We're applying a style to it. So let me get rid of this again, and we're going to go back. That occurs off of an event that gets fired. It's a filter that's called post_class. When that event fires to render that out, there's a callback that we've assigned in our plugin. If you took this plugin and you installed it, that particular callback, we scroll down here, would be add to post classes. There's an array that gets passed to us. This is the array of all the classes. Now we can go in and manipulate. We can add, we can remove, whatever we need to do in our code. What we're going to do is just target the home page, and that's it. That's why I have this in here. If it's not the home page, it's going to return the classes. At the very end, you want to make sure you return classes also, right? It's a filter, so it needs to be rendered out to the browser. So we want to make sure that we're returning whatever we've done to it. If we've done anything to the classes, we want to return that back. So we're going to be putting our code in on line 38. Okay, that's the starting code. Let's move on down. First question. I showed you the grid pattern of a 2-up and a 3-up. And sorry if you're not familiar with the up term. It's something I've used over the years. And I'm asking you to think in fractions about the columns and rows and spell that out. What styling class would you assign to a 2-column grid, a 3-column grid, and a 4-column grid? Let's think about that a second, right? What would you put on there? Think about it. Look at your row. How many columns do you have per row? If an article represents one of those columns, let's be verbose here and say, okay, 1 dash. A 2 would equal half. 3 would equal third. 4th would equal 4th. Okay, excellent. Those are our particular styling classes that we would use, would be 1 dash half, 1 dash third, 1 dash 4th, and so on. I want to stop here and introduce that you just learned purposeful naming convention. That's one of our principles, is that we want to be verbose so that we get self-documentation from the way we name things. Whatever we're naming in the code needs to have a verbose, self-documenting format to it. We want that naming convention. If it's a variable, it needs to tell us what that data represents. In this case, this is representing a variable. It's telling us that it represents 1 half, 1 third, 1 fourth. If it's a function, method, class, we would name it so that it tells us what it does, what its purpose is. You want to be verbose. Good. You just learned something new, right? Question number 2. Let's move on down. Using the starting code that I presented to you at the beginning here, how would you add 2-column styling class to each post classes? And write out the code. I already explained to you what a styling class is, so I don't need to go back through that again, right? I gave you a couple of hints. Let's think about that a second. We have an array coming to us, classes. We know that we want to add the styling class to that list of elements in that array. And there's actually 2 ways that you can do it. Maybe you didn't know that. So let's go over those 2 particular ways. The first way is with array push. So I'm essentially pushing a new element onto the end of an array. It's verbose, right? It tells us what it does. It's an array push. So here, if I look in the documentation, that's exactly what it says. I can push 1 or more elements onto the end of the array. So the first parameter in this function, the first argument, is the array, which in our case is what? $classes. The next variable that we're passing in is the value that we're going to push on. And in our case, it would be 1 dash half. So array push is one way of doing it. The best practice way of doing it actually is to not use array push, but if you look at the documentation, you can see it right here on the next line of code. It says array open close brackets, the assignment variable, which is $, and then whatever you're assigning to it. So for us, that would be $classes, our brackets, equals 1 half. That's best practice. Okay, did you get that one right? Good. I'm going to go ahead and close this one out. We're not going to cheat. Don't cheat. Question number 3. We have our grid, and our grid has columns and it has rows. We're attaching styles to those And we need to know when the first one in that row is so that we can say, okay, you're the first one, and I need to do something different with the styling so that things don't get offsetted. So we want to know that very first one in the row. How are we going to do that? We know that WordPress works on a loop. So we have this series of articles that are contained within the loop. It's going to have some sort of counting mechanism to know where it's at within that loop to say, okay, I'm doing the first one, I'm doing the second one, I'm doing the third one, so on and so forth, right? There's an arithmetic function. Oh, did I just skip? Yes, no, I'm on A. Sorry about that. There's an arithmetic function that we can use that's going to tell us what that first row is. Some of you probably have used it, maybe in other ways in mathematics, possibly. Maybe you've also used it here in code, but let's go ahead and talk about it. We want to look at the number where I'm at right now. So let's break this down into a formula before I give you the answer. Where I'm at right now, the very first one comes in, I'm at post number 1. I know I want 2 of them, so I can build a formula off of that. Let me tell you, though, that indexed arrays start at position 0, not position 1. So the very first index is 0. So if I say 0 divided by how many columns do I want for that row, which would be 2, what do I have left? What does that equal? 0. Is there a remainder for that? No. Let's go to the next one. Now I would be at index 1. I'm doing post 2. I'm at index 1. So I would be 1 divided by the number of columns is 2. I would get 0.5. Oh, I have a remainder. Yes, I have a remainder of 1. And if I keep going with that pattern, you can see, oh, it always equals that. Cool. And if I substitute it and I put it in with a 3, so I want 3 columns, there's a pattern there. The first one is always 0. Oh, okay. That gives me a clue. Excellent. So what I was telling you was to look in the manual. You can also do a quick Google search out there and look for arithmetic functions. If you did that, you landed on this particular page. And here are all arithmetic functions. The one we want, and I gave you a clue, remainder, right, is modulus. You're going to use the percent sign that will equal modulus. That tells us that that's modulus. And it even goes through and gives you some examples here. So basically for us, that is what we're going to use to know if I'm on the first one. Okay, so let's get rid of that. We're going to go back. 3b, question 3b. What is the variable for the loop's query? Okay, I just open up some of the hints here so that we can go through and see, what is the variable? I don't know. We know that whenever we do a loop, there's a class, there's objects. Maybe you didn't know that. Every time you do a loop, that class is getting instantiated, which becomes an object. That object is then stored into a global variable, and that global variable is what we're after here. So if I looked in Codex for the loop, and I scroll down, I come down here, and it's actually right here on this page. Global is $WP underscore variable. That's the global that we're going to be using. Okay, so keep that in your mind because we're building up to what the code's going to be. We're just going step by step here into what the code's going to be. So hold on to that one. Let's go down to 3.C. Now I need to know where I'm at, right? I'm in this loop and I need to know, okay, what posts are you working on right now? So there is an index number that is within that global variable that tells me where it's at, because I need that. So if I went and I looked it up, and hold on, that's not the right place. And I scroll down. This is what I asked you to do. You can see all of this is, here are all my properties that I can use within that global variable for WP underscore query. The one that we see here is current underscore post. And what does it say? The index of the post currently being displayed. That's the one I want. That's going to tell me where I'm at in my loop. So hold that one in your mind. We're going to scroll down here to 3D. Okay, so what would be the name of the styling class that sets the first post in a row? I gave it away, didn't I? I mean, you can name it a lot of different things. You can name it first column, first article, first post. We want to be kind of, with this one, when you're thinking about it, you may have multiple purposes for this one. You may be taking widgets and putting those into columns and rows. It may not always be a post. So with that, you may say, okay, well, I want to kind of be generic to say, why don't I just say first, right? You could say first column. That's even more verbose, and I like that too. Genesis uses just first. Okay, so let's get down to the actual challenge. Let's put this all together now and comment the code and see what we come up with, right? Okay, so first of all, let me show you that here's what the code does. It puts it into columns. Cool. And if I disable it, let's go and deactivate that. This is what it would normally look like. See how it's just one stacked on top of the other. That's how we're achieving that. So let's go and look at the actual code itself. I'm going to pull it over here. Okay, so we have our filter, we have our class. The very top part is the same. Here's our global that we put in here. We found that, right? That was $WP underscore query. Here's where we're assigning our 1/2 and putting it at the end of the class's array. So now we have a new element in the array. Next thing that we do is now we're going to use that global. And remember, I told you that the property is current underscore post. The percent sign equals modulus. There are two columns per row. So it's by 2, and I'm looking that it is equal to 0. There's no remainder left over, right? And if that occurs, then I'm going to push another class onto the end of classes, which is called first. Again, you can call it first column if you like. And then we have to return it. So there is the code. That completes the challenge. The thing that we're going to do next week is we're going to change this up a bit, because what if I want different types of grid patterns? I want it to be a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6. How would I do that? I don't want to just necessarily have a whole stack of these. How could I do it so that I'm refactoring my code and being smart about the way I write code? And that's what we're going to do next week. Okay. I hope that you got that challenge. Now let's get to the questions. Let's see what I got here. Oh, I got a few people. Let's see. Marcy, I'm going to skip yours real quick here, Laura, and I'm going to jump down to Marcy. Marcy asked me, do we need to use array classes for the filter, or can we just use classes? Yes, you can use just classes. The thing that I promote to you is to, when you can, you want to type define, you want to type hint what is coming into you. One, it helps you to know Two, it helps anyone looking at your code to know that this has to be an array. When I start teaching you about OOP, we'll actually define and say that this is an instance of this, whatever that object is. But here, I want you to get into the habit of using array classes. You can't use string or int or any of those, but you can with array, and you can with instances of a class and or an interface when we get into OOP. So I hope that answers your question. But yes, you can just use classes. The one thing, let me also just expand upon that for you, Marcy. What if this one you know you're going to get a class from or an array from? Maybe. What if somebody else stepped all over it and now it's not an array that's coming to you? Or you have another piece of code somewhere that you're expecting an array for your code, and you have a hook or you have something else that's driving it, but somebody passes you an int. They would get an error that lets them know, I sent you the wrong thing. In your code without that array, you would have to check to make sure it is an array so that your code doesn't bomb out. So that's why putting that array in there, make sure it gets rid of, let's say here, let me show you real quick. This is the code that you would want to put in here to protect your code, right? You don't want your code bombing out because let's say you're building a plugin and somebody's using it and they pass you the wrong thing, and now your code airs out and you get some bad feedback because, oh, you didn't protect your code. So you would have to put this in here to say, if you're not an array because I want you to be an array, then I'm just going to return you and get back out of there. This is how you would protect it if you didn't do that. So if I got rid of that, that's self-protecting, and you need to do that in your code so that it's dealing with a known state when it starts working. So you can see it's much easier just to say array, right? Much easier than having to put this extra code in here to self-protect your code. Okay. The next one, yeah, filter. I got that. Patrick asked me, I would like to add this to my core functionality plugin so it's easy to port between themes I'm creating. I've added it and I just comment and uncomment the include statement in the main file. Do you see any issue with that? Patrick, the include file for actually pulling this up, is that what you're meaning? No, I don't see any issue with that. When we get to the next part 2 of this series, you're going to see how you can actually refactor it to make it even better for yourself so that it's even more portable into your core functionality plugin. So I think that's going to work even better for you. And that'll probably give you more clues to what you're asking me here. Okay, now let's get back. Let's see. There was a question on here about, oh, no, it's gone now. Okay. Laura removed her question. But basically, she wanted to know, and I think it's a valid question, so let's go ahead and answer it. How would I have known that I want to target that particular filter, post_class? Basically, what you would do is you would go and look in Codex. You could do a Google search. But for me, I would say, okay, I would look in code in the core itself, and I would say, all right, what filter is doing this particular function? And I would say that it's a post, I'm adding classes, and that's where I would start, is because if it's named properly, then following our naming convention, then it's easy to find because it makes sense, right? It's very verbose, it's self-documenting, and that's how I would search for something, is to actually search in code and look for that. So I hope that makes sense to you too. All right. I guess that answers all the questions for today. If you guys have any more, we can chat on Slack. We can also chat in comments for those who are not members coming to this program later. And I appreciate you, everyone, being here today. Look for the second part of this coming out later this week, and we'll have some even more fun and be a bit more challenging next week. I thank everybody for joining me here today, and I hope you have an excellent day. Thank you.